not particularly warm, although I've got a little bit of a tan, as you'd expect after being in France for 5 weeks. But yeah, long story short, it was difficult. Probably fished 25 nights in total. Caught 14 fish and lost at least 5. I think maybe 5 or 6. So I might have had 20 bites in 25 nights. But there was plenty of time when it wasn't happening, when it wasn't going well, and you have like flurries of activity when you find some fish and get it right. I'll tell you a little story from the very, very beginning of the session. So I'm pretty sure Man U had played in the day. They'd won the FA Cup, and I wasn't supposed to be going fishing until the next day. However, I spoke to a friend who lives out in France, who told me that the lake had just suddenly started fishing well. The weather had suddenly gone hot at the end of May. The lake had suddenly started to produce a few fish. They hadn't spawned. And when I told my friend that I was coming the next day, he said, you could not have timed it better. Someone I know is leaving today, and they've caught 5 or 6 fish in the last few days, up to like mid-50s. As soon as I heard that, I'm like sitting in the living room. The van was packed, and I was like, I can't wait until tomorrow. I had literally no chance. I can't wait. So I ended up changing my crossing and driving through the night. And I arrived at Gigantica. It was 3 a.m. when I rolled through the gates. I literally came through the gates, parked up in the car park, put my bed chair up, slept for a couple of hours. Suddenly it's light, 6, 7 o'clock, something like that. I can't remember exactly, but dragged my boat out from under its cover, threw all the gear on it, drove it to the lake, put it in at the slipway, got into the area where my friend had said had been doing some fish, put the rods out. But I've got to be honest, because I drove through the night, because I didn't really sleep well, like I got to Gigantic at stupid o'clock. By the time I got to the lake, got the rods out, I was absolutely exhausted. I didn't see any fish when I put the rods out, and I had a tench at 1 a.m, and I just didn't put the rod back out. I was just like, bad angling basically. I was just tired, so I didn't put it back out there. In the morning, I had a good search in this area where I'd been sort of told to look, didn't see anything. And then you always think that the grass is greener somewhere else. And I've got these new batteries for my big boat and the engine. I went for a sort of a big tour around the lake, and all the areas that I really wanted to sort of explore, go into the forest, sort of look in the trees, see if I can find any fish. There was already people fishing there. So I ended up doing a 5 or 6 hour drive around the lake, only to return to the original spot. Now, the original spot, I'd baited before I left. I'd gone into the forest. I'd baited this spot that had been recommended to me with just a few handfuls of tigers. And when I came back, all the tigers were gone. Now, didn't think too much about it, as in I'd caught a tench there. I then put the rod there and immediately caught another tench there. So that sort of made me think that the tench were probably responsible for clearing the tigers. However, this time I wasn't so tired, having slept through the night. Put the rod back there. It's gone in the early hours of the night. I'm fishing about 100 metres to the forest. Bit of a opening exchange, bit of a like back and forth for a few seconds before it's all jammed up. Jumped into the inflatable, roared over there in the dark with a head torch on. You can see this big flat pile of reeds, and my line's just pointing at like a big raft of reeds, and it's not snagged. I'm just gaining line, so I'm just winding with the rod tip down and thinking, just gain line, because there's so many fallen trees in the forest that at any second it could lock up on anything. But at the moment, I'm gaining. Suddenly the lead core is in the tip ring, so I stop winding, back wind off, and this, well, I didn't know how big it was at the time, but this massive common just come into view, wallowing, just like full of spawn, absolutely massive, just went straight in the net, and I'd only been there 48 hours, and it was a 60 pounder. But like, in all honesty, there's no merit with that capture, in that someone told me the fish were in that bay, told me where they'd been catching them from. I didn't see anything. I just put my rod there and caught one.
Still got to catch it.
Still got to reel it in.
You still got...
Yeah, it could. And I'll tell you what's really interesting is, obviously, it'd gone under these reeds that I've just wound it in from underneath. This flat surface, dead reeds on the top. But a couple of days later, when these reeds cleared, what I didn't realise was a massive fallen tree under there,
Really?
and how I'd literally just without. I'm not saying I was beasting it.
Yeah.
It just came. It was like it was coming. I'm thinking, if it's coming, keep it coming.
Yeah.
If it's coming, keep it coming.
If you knew that tree was there,
yeah, I might have panicked. You know, if I
Yeah.
like because there was a whole fallen tree in the water, and it's literally just swum under these reeds, gone straight in the net. To be fair as well, I messed the pictures up a little bit, as in I'd done them at the crack of dawn, at ISO 3200,
right?
which,
A little bit too much, is it, on that camera?
it's all right, do you know? But it's just not what it could. The light's not right. Do you know what I mean? You're getting a lot of like glare on the fish and stuff. It's just I should have waited to like 8, 9, 10 o'clock rather than. Thing is, I did it in the early hours of the night. The fish is full of spawn. Sacking fish in France is properly like illegal. So if a garde de pêche should come to the to my boat and there's a fish there in a sling, you can get fined for that. So I was like, I'm going to do the pictures as soon as I can. You know, it's like,
You got pictures of it. So.
Pictures it didn't happen. It happened.
Yeah.
So
Carry on.
No. So that was a good start, and I ended up catching from a lot of areas around the lake. Basically, finding small groups of fish in different bits and pieces. I don't want to talk too much because I want to do some big carp stories. I want to, I want to
just do a little taster.
But at one particular point, the boys from Corda came out to film. They're filming this documentary. It's not about my fishing orient at all. It's just they're just capturing some stuff like in your sort of natural environment, as they would say. And I baited a spot while they were there. And in the morning after they went, I flew the drone over this spot that I baited. And the spot that I baited wasn't smoking, but a spot close to that was smoking. And what I mean by smoking is like fish were clouding up on a spot near the spot I baited. And when you're fishing a really, really big lake like that, you know that if they're there, they're there. You know, if they're that close, you know, like 100 meters. If they're feeding 100 meters there, there's a good chance they're.
Yeah.
When you see them on the drone, not that you see them very often, they're covering a lot of ground. They're moving really fast. So over the course of the day, I imagine they're cutting about a lot of water. So I've seen this spot smoking. The boys from Corda are fucked off. I've gone up there, put the rig in. It's been in the water about 2 hours. It's bust off. It's 48 pounder, and it was just pussing out the tigers that I'd baited the day before with. And I'm thinking, yeah, we're on here. We're on good. But like I say, I don't want to give too much away because obviously I want to do the proper in-depth big carp story. Because I know a lot of you have been asking for the big carp stories, but obviously I've given everything that I've got, more or less, not everything, but now that I've got my little band coming, I might.
Well, we get messages from members asking about when are you doing more big carp stories, when are you doing this, when are you doing that. But what I think some members, I mean a lot of members do appreciate that we can't film stuff with you every week, but what the contributions you do make to us keeping this channel going allows you to go out and do these things. If it wasn't for
long-winded, big carp story, you cannot film that on a daily basis because there's too much time goes into it. It's just we put a film out every Friday. I can't have a cameraman with me 24/7 and just drip out what I'm doing every Friday because most of the time I'm not catching anything on those sort of campaigns, and it would get very, very boring very quickly. But ultimately, I do appreciate that a lot of people, they really love the big carp story because you're getting a year's worth of information in one story. But obviously, it takes a year to accumulate that information. Yeah. You know?
So stick with us. They are coming.
They are coming. There's quite a few in the pipe, and obviously I'm off to 3 islands with Scott for the CarpFix social on the 27th for a week. So we've got CarpFix members fishing with us. We've got the lake exclusively. Going to be a real sort of crayfish episode, I think, because
fishing with plastics.
Basically, fishing like apparently the crayfish are as bad as you can expect. You know, they're literally mauling everything. So I've never personally fished anywhere where it's like that. So I'm looking forward to having that challenge, overcoming it, and hopefully catching something.
Yeah.
And so we've got a week there with the CarpFix members, which will obviously be a film or two, depending on how it goes. And then I'm off to Gigantica in August on the CarpFix social as well. And then I've got a week with Dovey on Gigantica the week after. So I've got basically in the next 6 weeks or so, we've got Sorry,
I'll go. You keep talking.
So it's coming.
Keep talking.
It's coming. Sorry, mate. Go on. So I've got. Sorry, Scott's got a little bit of business to attend to. I've got 3 weeks in France over the next 6 weeks. Like I say, a week at Three Islands and then 2 weeks at Gigantica. But hopefully you're getting your questions in, and we'll be answering everything that you've got carp fishing related. And if you've got anything sort of recommendations for films and that would be good as well. So sorry for the interruption. you can explain that, because I was just waffling for a second.
That was
Doris
interrupting our CarpFix live.
Doris lives next door to the studio.
Yeah, she watches CarpFix all the time. She's currently watching Wimbledon. Yeah, probably got a question about why the TV's not working.
Yeah,
God knows.
Have we got some questions then, Scotty?
Bless her. Yes, we have. Yes.
Yeah.
Right, we've got Timothy Robinson has asked, when fishing in weed with your long stiff hinge, what's the longest you would go with the hook link, and would you use something different when casting long range in weed? Love the latest content.
He's obviously referring to the Corda film, which is the long hinge that I was doing there. And what you've got to bear in mind, that rig was designed specifically for that situation because of the rules. Now, you're not allowed zig rigs at Grenville's, and you're not allowed to fish helicopter rigs at Grenville's. So I basically created that rig so that I could fish tall pop-ups in the line of fish swimming over the top of low-lying weed. If zig rigs were allowed, I'd have probably fished directly off the lead. I think in that situation, like a 12-inch, 18-inch zig would have been, not like, when I say a zig, I mean a pop-up off the lead. But, that could be interpreted as a zig, so obviously I couldn't do that. But in that situation, on that lake, if you were allowed to fish off the lead, I would have done. Like, I would have fished exactly the same with the mouth trap, but just taller and directly off the lead, because it's more instant. The fish sucks in the bait, gets a good whack. What was he saying?
What's the longest you would go with the hook link, and would you use something different when casting long range in weed? Yeah,
so if I was casting long range into low-lying weed of the same type that I was in that film, I would just fish off the lead with a lead clip. So you're basically fishing a mono hook link that's a foot long of mouth trap with a slight little curve in the top of it, and then you wouldn't need to worry about tangles. There's no way a stiff hook link like that's going to tangle, and it's you'd be dropping a lead as well. So for weed, it'd be absolutely perfect.
Cool. Daniel Hockaday. Hi, both. Fishing a French venue this year with a boat potentially 300 plus yards. What size lead would you use? I've emailed about a charity match we have in Suffolk in September, but haven't heard a reply yet. I get, Daniel, unfortunately, inundated with lots of emails about giving to charity, etc. So email it to scott@carpfix.tv and I will take a closer look. Fishing a French venue.
So in lead size.
Yeah.
I like a big lead. I think you could get away with using like a 5-6 ouncer. You could get away with that. But in all honesty, if you can get older 10s, I would use 10s, because you can when you're going back to the bank, so you drop the rig, you're going back to the bank, you can keep a little bit more tension on the spool, keeping a tighter line, which is nice. And it's just, when I put a 10-ounce lead down, it's not moving, and if a fish picks it off the bottom, it's getting hooked. So obviously there's a limit. You wouldn't want to put like a 10 kilo lead on, but a 10 ounce lead, it's not going to move. It's doing the job that you want it to. Basically, you want your lead to stay in place. You don't want it to move, and you want it to hook the fish. For me, there's no advantage if you're placing it from the boat. There's no advantage to a smaller one, other than maybe a 5 ounce lead costs less than a 10 ounce lead. But yeah, for me, I would use a 10 just because I know it's going to mess them up when they pick it up, and I know it's going to stay in place.
In terms of line, I guess you're always using braid there, yeah?
Yeah, I would. If you're going to fish at more than 150 yards, I would always recommend braid. And obviously, sinking braids, a lot of, especially subline. Like I use subline most of the time. The Corda one in 15 pound, really, really, really strong. Quite coarse, as in it's quite a rough thing. Cuts through weed really well, but it sinks so well that if there's snags between you and it, it's going to sink down into them. And if it's really weedy between you and it, there's a chance it's going to sink down into it. But I certainly wouldn't recommend you use floating braid. Floating braid obviously comes to the surface, and then once it's on the surface, whatever's drifting on the surface, weed, debris, bits and pieces, will just gather on the line. Slowly that builds up into tension, and you get dragged off your spot. So you want to be using either a sinking braid, and if you have got snags and real thick weed between where you and where you're fishing, you want sort of like a slower sinking braid, something like the Apex.
Whilst we're on the topic of French venues, obviously we have a group for free eels, and we spoke about fishing against these crayfish. Should we just cover that topic of how, because a lot of people go to lakes with crayfish in them in France. How would you approach a lake?
How am I going to approach it?
Yeah. You could say how you're going to approach free eels, but yeah, what do you take boilies or do you not? Like, what would you do if there is a load of crayfish in your lake?
There's crayfish and then there's crayfish, right? So like some lakes just have a few little ones that you get a few nibbles from here and there, and then I would just pretty much stick to standard tactics. I wouldn't be
boilies as
well.
Yeah.
But you do hear of places, especially high summer, because crayfish become like a lot more active high summer, like now, July, August, they were at their absolute worst. Now, we're hearing they're pretty bad at Three Islands at the moment. I know they're doing work with nets and stuff to sort of reduce the numbers, but I've seen pictures of people having
the plastic wrap.
Like the shrink wrap stuff.
Shrink wrap, yeah.
In my opinion, this is not, bear in mind I've never really fished anywhere, I think that that's not the way to go, personally. I think if you've got slight crayfish issues, then yeah, maybe you're going to start wrapping your baits. But if you've got severe crayfish issues, in my mind, I don't want the crayfish knowing that there's real food inside that wrap, holding on to it and working it. What I want it to do is, this isn't food, move off. So like, I'm going to fish straight plastic on the hook. I'm going to start with probably I'll probably have rods on plastic maize.
Go on, keep talking.
So I'll probably fish slow sinking maize, maybe on 1 or 2 rods, and then those mainline /cord are rubber balls that are they're flavoured. Now, having done a bit of sort of chatting with people that fish more sort of crayfish infested lakes that are really bad, they tell me that unflavoured is best. If the crayfish are really, really bad, then like you want them to come to a rubber ball, realise that it's not food, move on and carry on eating the feed. So that's the hook bait thing I'm going over. So you're gonna look for plastic to start with, and if they're still going for the plastic, unflavoured plastic, and then now we're going to talk about free offerings. Now, if the crays are really bad, I'm hearing that putting loads of bait out is the way to go. Now, I would never sit here and say that you need to go and put 20 key boilie on your spot, because obviously that costs loads and loads and loads of money. And if it's a fish meal boilie, you're just going to be making those crayfish go absolutely wild. Now, I'm going to go down the maize and tigers route. Crayfish will eat tigers, they will eat maize, but it's not their preferred choice. And if I'm going to be putting out, I'm anticipating putting 20-30 kilo out as soon as I get there. that's not something that I do on a day-to-day basis, but I will do that there because I know there's loads of crays. I want an absolute carpet of food over the bottom, because if the crayfish are eating everything, the carp are going to be hungry. So I want to put a load of food out for them that the crayfish can't get through, that they aren't overly fussed about, and fish baits over the top. Why would a crayfish sit there with my bit of plastic when there's just an absolute mountain of bait down there? And then the carp comes in, he hasn't got the same option. He just sucks it in his mouth and gets hooked. So it's I don't want my rig being mauled. I don't want the crayfish holding my bait, working it, blocking it from a carp that might be coming down. So I'm creating a carpet of feed that's going to have the fish sucking and blowing all the time, and almost the hook bait is going to. I'm hoping the hook bait goes in the mouth by accident, rather than being attracted to it. So trying to make the hook bait as unattractive as possible, but as robust and sort of inert, just there waiting, poised for when a carp comes and makes a mistake.
In terms of rigs, because there'll be guys that are coming on the trip watching this, I
Yeah.
know there are, what would you avoid? Obviously, the tungsten you avoid.
Yeah, I've never had this problem, but I've heard that crayfish love tungsten. Now, in my head, that could be people just talking a bit of rubbish, but I don't think it. Right. Yeah, I generally think they actually go for the putty on the rigs. It's not just that they're attacking the rig and it gets caught up on them.
They're not going to go, a bit of tungsten.
I think they actually do go for it though. They are sort of, and I've heard the tubing comes back all sort of all cut up. Yeah, but so Corda do normal rig tubing, which isn't as heavy, doesn't sink as fast, but that's fine. It works. Yeah. It's going to do the job. And if I really want it to sink, then I'll just wrap some lead wire out of some lead core around the top of the tubing to make it sink. Yeah. I probably won't bother because I'm lazy. I don't think it.
Not when you had a couple of Stellas, mate. You ain't doing that.
Oh, mate, I'm worried about that. The old going to the gym all winter long, and then just suddenly, as soon as the weather's good, I've been at Gigantic and I with that fridge. Football's been on, coming home, and it's just like, but I can't go on the CarpFix social and not drink. I'd be a right dry lunch, wouldn't I?
Yeah, you can have a couple.
Yeah.
1 or 2.
Zeros.
Yeah, so rigs, obviously, yeah.
Oh, right, so what am I going to use?
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with combi multi-rigs, with normal plastic rig tubing probably, rather than tungsten rig tubing. And if I think that they're not like really doing that over, like that's getting smashed up, I think that's going to be fine, to be fair. I think that presentation is going to be what I start with and what I finish with. But if that becomes an issue, I'll go on to Ronnie rigs with shrink tube rather than kickers. So it's just like a boom, crimped, that's it, nothing, keeping it away the whole time. And I'll probably this time as well, on the combi multi rigs, I'll probably fish with an anti-tangle sleeve as opposed to a ring swivel, because obviously the ring swivel can kick out like that, but then the crayfish can walk that back up your line and get it caught up the tubing. So I'm going to fish an anti-tangle sleeve so that it's difficult for the crayfish to walk the rig back up.
Yeah. Got to think about everything, haven't you?
Yeah, in my head, it's not a big deal. To really sort of simplify what I'm going to do, I'm going to fish a massive bed of vegetable-type bait with inert plastic over the top. That's the opening line of attack. Yeah. I think the carp are going to be hungry, because if the crayfish are that bad, those fish in there are used to eating boilies. They're used to finding bait. If the crayfish are mauling it all, then they're going to be like, where's the food at?
Yeah.
So,
is there a time you think? I know you don't fish with crayfish all the time, but is there a time when you've heard the most active? Is a crayfish move around?
High summer,
but like time of day,
night. High summer, night time, gravel. That's
the worst.
Yeah, so that's the worst of the worst. I like fishing on gravel because I think your rigs perform best.
Yeah.
But on those French lakes, when in carp fishing, you say gravel, silt, clay, and that's, people think that's everything. But silt and mud are two different things, but often talked about in the same breath. Basically, anything that's smooth is silt.
Yeah.
Which is silt is broken down leaf and weed matter. That's silt. Yeah. Whereas mud is the bottom of the lake, and those French lakes, particularly, and UK lakes as well, are the mud. When you fly the drone, on these lakes, you see mushroom clouds of disturbed mud, and that is the fish digging in the mud for these, like, I wouldn't even. They're basically worms, but not earthworms. They're like some micro sort of clear tubular worm. If you look at the mud, sometimes on the bottom you see like pinprick holes, and that's like bloodworm, but they're not red. They're clear. And that is what these French carp are mostly getting massive on, is the mud. So I'll be looking for the mud spots. Rather, not silt, I'll be looking to fish on firmish mud. That's what I'm looking for.
I actually did a thinking tackle with Corda on free eels and took the underwater drone out there.
Oh, yeah.
And what you're saying about the little holes, almost like you see at the beach.
Yeah.
We saw exactly that going over the muddy areas, basically just little holes everywhere.
Yeah, that's what they are.
But the drone was looking down, and we'd just take it along like that, and it was just like we were going over the spotsy boilies, but there was just little holes.
Yeah, and that's why those lakes mud up in the way when the fish start like feeding and the water all clouds up. That's them digging in the mud for them.
And obviously, the muddy areas are less attractive for crayfish generally over like gravel.
I think so. I'm not saying it. I think they'll be there too, but they generally dig holes in hard bits. So they like you'll have gravel spots, and they'll dig holes under stones where they sort of they hide. So the gravel will be worse. But if there's as many, when there's loads of them, they'll be fighting for territory and living where they can.
Yeah. Well, it'll be a challenging session.
I'm looking forward to it in that way, because ultimately, to have that in your locker, the more diverse you are and the more problems that you can solve, the better angler you are. So, because I've never encountered fierce crayfish before, I want to. Yeah. I want to have the problem, solve it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even though I'm hoping to put the rods out, because of the situation, I'm gonna really concentrate on getting a solid film that shows how you combat.
Yeah.
If you can catch, I know it's going to be hard. I don't see us catching loads of fish because of the conditions. But one of the reasons why I want to film it hard, even though it's a social, I want to film it like we normally do. Yeah. Because you could just, if you get everything right.
It's always a social when we're filming.
Yeah, but if you get everything right, you could go and catch, quite a few. So I don't want to miss an opportunity to capture how you've combated. Hopefully, combated.
I think it should be pretty straightforward. I think, like in my head, like beyond that, I haven't really got a plan B. Yeah. As in, if loads of the vegetable bait and straight plastic doesn't work, I haven't really got a plan B. Yeah. So plan A needs to work.
The thumbnail's going to be your head, like with a
crayfish,
our face and a crayfish, and no carp in it.
Yeah. So I haven't got a plan B. I haven't got a plan B at the moment. No problem. Right. No problem.
No, it's all right. It's fine. It's good. Busy out there tonight.
Yeah.
Right. Let's have a look. So, Freddie Carey, how would Darrell approach a large 35-acre lake plagued with big tench, ruled by bait boats, non-bait boat user? So he doesn't use bait boats.
You're going to be up against it. Like, when I fished at Yateley was riddled with tench, and I fished without a bait boat there and was extremely successful. But Yateley was a small lake, 9 acres, no casts of over sort of 70 yards. And it's easy to fish extremely efficiently up to that range, really, really well. But on a 35-acre lake, you're going to have some longer chucks. And the bottom line is you cannot recreate as efficiently what a bait boat does by casting, not even if you're the best caster in the world, because you can, with a bait boat, you can put your rig in it, you can put a handful of bait in it, and you can drop it without making any disturbance, and it's like having one spawn without the splash. Exactly what you just cannot do that. So if you're going to fish without a bait boat, you are 100% going to be at a disadvantage. But if you can sort of turn elements of that in your favour, in that, people will all be dropping piles of bait, and you can go down the route of boilie fishing, textbook standard widespread boilie fishing. If there's loads of tench, I would go to 20 to 22 to 24 mil boilies, depending what you can get your hands on. And obviously, you find your spots. You're going to put your rig onto the spots casting as normal. You're going to bait up, get some boilies tight to the spot. 2 handfuls of boilies on a spot is enough, in my opinion. Like 2 handfuls, that could be, depending on how big the baits are, that could be 20, 40, I don't know, depending on how big the boilies are. 2 handfuls around the rod is enough tight. But pre-baiting a wider area, keeping fish in the zone, people won't be doing that. And if they're getting hammered on bits and pieces and the tench are a problem, then tuning fish to a big boilie can be done. But it's going to cost you money, as in you're going to have to put quite a few of them in there. If you've got a few mates, you should all be using the same bait and all fishing, getting it going in. It's not just about one area, getting the boilies going in over the whole lake, wherever the fish are, feeding the fish to boilies, and then they'll start looking for them. And you can have good results doing that. But if you're fishing a lake that's got bait boats and it's tight to islands, under trees, and it's all about that sort of stuff, I'm afraid you're not going to compete on a level playing field without the bait boat, no matter how good at casting you are.
Beautiful. We've got one from Daniel. Daniel has said, "Hi folks, only recently started to do long sessions but struggling to choose correct baiting approach. What would be your go-to approach for a week session? Any tips? Because I see..."
Sorry, say again. Sorry, I missed the start of it.
Only recently started to do long sessions but struggling to choose the correct baiting approach. What would be your go-to approach for a week session? Any tips? Because I see a lot of 5 kilos per day.
It all depends on the lake and how many fish are in there, but I rarely set out a week-long plan unless I'm fishing on a commercial venue where you can't move. When I'm fishing, like go to Orient for 5 weeks, go abroad and out to canals, I just fish every night as a one-nighter, and that's not a great plan if you know the lake or you know the venue really well. But when you don't know anything, I find it really hard to invest quantities of bait and just sit on it. If you're in a really good swim and you're going to get traffic, you can put 5 kilo bait out, get your rods out nicely, and just wait for the fish to build confidence on it, start having it and that. But that's not... that will work. Will work on some lakes, done right in the right situation. But I like to read the situation and do whatever I think's called for at any given time. Like when we're filming, one of the biggest problems is Scott wants me to tell the viewer what I'm doing, and everything I'm doing is open to change at the drop of a hat. Everything continuously changing my mind based on what I've seen. I might say I'm going to put one out there and then cast out there. It didn't feel very nice. No, I'm not going to fish out there. Actually, I'm going to fish over here. Or I might see one. I'm constantly adapting based on what I see, and I like to fish like that. It's only once I've fished the lake a few times and I notice a pattern in what they like to do that I think, rather than run around like a headless chicken trying to chase them, if I just fish here on that spot, put this much bait out, they'll find that bait in X amount of time, and I'll catch more by sitting still, by letting them know it's there. But I have to feel like I know that's the right thing to do, and I only feel like I know that's the right thing to do if I've sat there long enough and watched it. So I rarely have confidence to turn up somewhere and go, yeah, if I just whack 10k out here and sit, I'm going to catch.
Yeah.
Because if it was that easy, everyone would just do that.
Yeah.
One of the standard thing is, like on a day ticket lake, commercial lake, I ain't caught anything, put a small bait out. It's just that if it was that easy, everyone would just catch the same.
There'd be a lot of bait companies around as well.
Yeah.
A lot more bait companies.
Yeah.
Chris Lines, what's the worst thing that's happened to you in fishing? Maybe losing a fish at the net or someone catching one of your target fish? What are we saying? What's the worst thing that's happened to you in fishing? Would you like time to think and we will come back?
The worst thing that's happened. I remember, like, at the end of my time on Rockford, so I fished it in the Cemex days. It was a 100-man syndicate. It was a nice experience to fish there. And then when it was taken over by Ringwood, the guys that came on directly afterward, they had this attitude of, this is our lake now. But it was an open club, so the syndicate members joined it, and we were technically part of that. And I just remember the attitude of that. Like, it was really hard to experience a really nice, lovely syndicate, decent etiquette of people on there, and for it to just turn into the wild west of, like, moralless fishing. It was just, it went from a lovely place to fish to literally hell on earth. Yeah. It was like 4 to 6 anglers a night to 30 anglers a night. And there was, like, in the evenings when people started casting out, it was just like crack off after crack. It was just like crack off. So it was like, we're sitting in my swim just hearing and you're just seeing live rigs just land out in the middle of the lake, and you're just thinking, this lake's finished. It's over. You know, it's just, yeah, that was hard.
That's pretty bad thing.
It was hard to see something that was once lovely become horrible.
Yeah.
You know, that was, yeah.
Cool. Neil Hulks, did you get messy watching the footy last night, Peckin? Did you cycle home? Well, yeah,
of course I did. But well, of course I did. I only took 4 beers, four big ones. But it only takes 4 big ones for me to be messy at the moment, because I've been abstaining over the winter, so I've lost my tolerance levels to it. 4 would be a warm up back in the day, whereas 4 is like, 4's a good session for me at the moment. It's like, but I put my crash helmet on and cycle. But it's not far from mate Ben's house. It's like 10-15 minute ride.
All right, let's bring it back to fishing rather than football. Leonard, would you fish a zig overnight? We've had this one before.
Yeah, look, when people first use zigs, literally one of the most common things you hear people say, "Yeah, might try them during the day. Might put one rod out on a zig in the day." Where, if the water's clear, and especially in the spring, you know, they're actually really, really good at night. For me, zigs are at their best in the winter and in the spring, and they're equally as good at night as they are in the day. And I've literally got no qualms about fishing a flavourless piece of black foam at night if the water is clear. But the water does, in my opinion, need to have an element of clarity, because I believe they see it and they take it as a silhouette, as opposed to like, literally flavouring zigs and all of that. For me, in clear water is a complete waste of time. You know, if it's murky, different kettle of fish, different thing. But at night, silhouette, clear water, no problem.
Cool. Right, Robert Pizzi is going to Parco in September.
Yep.
Our rigs will be your combi multi rigs, as these may potentially be bigger fish on a size 4 hook. What's the longest length you would use the dark matter loop to boom?
Is he asking the longest length of loop I would use, or
loop to
the
loop part?
When I use size 4s, I use a 4.5 centimetre loop or a 5 centimetre loop, depending on the length of the kicker. But I always increase the length of the kicker when I use a size 4. So when I'm fishing at Orient, my kickers are about they're between 1.5 and 2 centimetres long, sort of in that sort of probably 1700 mil. You know, that not 1700, like 1.7 centimetres of kicker. And to allow for that kicker and the slightly longer shank of the hook, you're going to want to increase that loop from 3.5 to 4.5/5.
Okay, so just a slight bit longer.
Yeah,
which makes sense.
Yeah.
You've said you have covered that before.
Yeah, but it's obviously they see me use a 6 all the time.
Yeah.
And they've probably heard me say that before, but like, increase the size of the loop, but increase it by how much?
Yeah.
So it is a good question.
Daniel Metcalf. Darrell, have you seen Roger Bacon's rig that he used on Grenville? I certainly have.
Yeah.
If so, what do you think of it? I think it looks good, but I would love to hear what you think. I'm actually going to try and get Paul at Grenville to let us put his rig with him underwater. I think like on Grenville.
He's obviously convinced by it, but for someone like me who's obsessed with hook sharpness, that rig is just not. It's an impossibility for me to use that rig because I could not tie it enough. I put a new hook on every time I cast out. I don't mean with a miscast, but like if I cast out for the night, I sink the line, it's out there, and I reel it in and I don't catch anything, I put a new hook on. So, but if I'm catching bream, I'm catching carp, that rig would take too long for me to tie for it to be practical is the word I'm looking for. It's just not practical for me. But he catches a lot of fish. I'm not going to say it doesn't work, but I'm going to say I don't think it catches any more fish than rigs that are much, much quicker and easy to change the hook on, my opinion. But yeah, he would say different probably.
Yeah. Steve Middleton, guys, CarpFix is excellent program. Really enjoy it. Thank you. He's also asked, what braid would you use at Raisbury, floating or sinking? Have you done much on Raisbury?
No, I have fished it a couple of times. I would always use sinking. I don't think you're actually allowed to use braid on Raisbury. I think it's mono only. Dovey's been fishing up there. But I use sinking braid. I use sub braid most of the time when I do use braid. I can't imagine using floating braid. Because when I've ever, as a youngster, I've tied up rigs onto my marker rod and wazzed them out there and caught fish doing so. But what always happens is the braid floats to the surface. It comes up in a big arc and stuff gathers on it. So if you've got any form of wind, you usually end up getting dragged off your spot. When I fished at Rockford, I fished floating braid, but with backleads. So I cast out my floating braid with a rig on it, sink it, get the line under the water, and then put a backlead on, and you fish it cranked down to the backlead so that it can't get up to the surface film. And that worked. But obviously it'll be off the bottom between the backlead and the thing. It will be like bellied up like this, and it will be ugly. It will be ugly. The only benefit of using floating braid is it casts miles. You can get what I know the Fox is it Horizon or Submerged? Basically, Fox do different types of sinking braid, and one of them isn't a fast sinking braid. It's more supple and it's more like it's not neutral because it does sink, but it's not going to be so heavy that it piles down into the weed. And I think when you're fishing on like really weedy lakes, that can be an edge. So it sort of just rests on the top of the weed rather than sinking right down into it. A little bit
of weight to it.
Little bit, as long as it ain't popping up. Because if it starts to come up and get onto the surface, stuff gathers on it. Yeah. And you'd be amazed how quick it builds up and then drags you off the spot.
Yeah. We got one from Daniel. Do you think now everyone is using worm in their mix, it's now lost its edge?
I don't fish those type of lakes enough to know that. Like I'm really, really, really late to the worm party. I've only used it a couple of times with success, or even once really. I used it on that. I've done a long session to the Manor Carp Fishery. They've banned the worms since then, but it was night and day when I was using worms. I was catching. When I run out of worms, I wasn't catching. So they are incredibly effective. But like anything, if everybody is fishing it, it will lose its edge. That's one of the biggest things in carp fishing. Like we are all sheep, as in we all go to the swim that's done the last bite. You see someone catch, we all go onto the rig that everyone's using, or we all colour bait. We all do those things. But for me, my favourite way to fish anywhere is to do a bit of a campaign, and it's building up. Like it's seeing what people are doing, realising what they're not doing that they should be doing, and then doing that. The amount of times that Like, I can go back when I was a kid. I fished this lake called Newlands Hall. Thousands and thousands and thousands of carp in there. They should be climbing up the rod left, right, and centre. And we used to fish there with really crap boilies, like these like rock hard Richworth things. And if you were lucky, in 24 hours, you might catch 1 to 3 fish. And then salmon pellets came out, and we used to fish stringers of salmon pellets. And we used to catch a few more using them. The fish were more attracted to them, and they were new at the time. Yeah. Anyway, one time we went down there with peanuts. No one uses peanuts there. We boiled up these peanuts at home, spommed them out there, and we could not keep the rods in the water. The swim looked like an absolute jacuzzi. They were just like frothing the bottom up. Yeah. It's because we were using something that nobody else used. Yeah. You know, it's good things work, but they blow. And to rewind that whole story, I went to this one of my father-in-law's friends. His daughter's boyfriend is a carp fisherman, and I basically got roped into taking him fishing at Newlands Hall. We got there, fished solid bags, caught a few on pellets, not many. And I know there's thousands of carp in this lake. I'm like, we're doing it wrong. So I reeled in, went to the tackle shop, bought a load of maggots, come down, spommed out a few, like 20 spoms of maggots. And we just, again, couldn't keep the rods in the water. So having the right bait on that they are attracted on, it's night and day. But like anything good, nothing good lasts forever. And if everyone's doing the same thing, the fish will get wary, and it'll make it more difficult.
Yeah. Any chance of a bit of floater fishing, Darrell? I know it's not your preferred method, but always a good watch.
I'm not very good at floater fishing without practice because I've forgotten like a lot of the stuff. But Rob Burgess has just done a floater film, and I've seen some of the clips of it on, like, Ash has been dropping them on social media, and it looks absolutely epic. But because they've been catching a few, I'm open to, because it's quick couple of days here and there, isn't it? It's not like a long-winded thing. If the weather's, I'm off now, from now until the 27th. If the weather's nice,
go out for a couple of days,
and yeah, we get in contact with Rob, I'll go and do a film with Rob, and do a bit of floater fishing because it's good fun. You know, like we all do. Like carp fishing, so repetitive. Get in a swim, find a spot, spom some bait out, cast your rig on it, wait. It'd be nice to do while the weather's nice. Do a bit of one rod, minimal kit. You know, catch a few.
I was listening to Lewis Porter at Fox's. He did a podcast with the guys at Baitworks, and they were saying if there was one angler that you would, get them to catch fish to save your life, he said your name. But he said the only thing I don't know if he can do is floater fish.
Yeah, obviously I have. I'm trying to think, what's the biggest fish I've caught off the top? I don't think I've had a 40 off the top. I think the biggest one I've had 30s. Definitely.
30's good though.
I've had 38 off the top. But the truth is, I just don't carry the kit.
Yeah.
I used to do a bit of float fishing, but I just haven't. And I would certainly not sit here and say, I must do floater fishing. You know, I certainly wouldn't say that. I do like to think though that I can turn my hand to all things, you know, and like anything, you're going to get it wrong to start with, but it's being able to make the adjustments. And you know, if you floater fishing is basically you're feeding, you're using exactly, you're trying to mimic what you're feeding on the hook, and the trouble is the biggest problem with surf fishing is they don't take the hook bait. That, from memory, is you get them feeding, you get them taking, and then they can see the one with the line on it, the one with the hook on it, because the hook's sitting different, your bait's not quite the same. So the one of the real keys of float fishing is getting your hook bait right.
So on the last film that I just did with Luke Valerie, if you watch that, there's a couple of drone clips in there. So we had the drone while the fish were going around the floaters, and they literally were going straight for the hook. We're about this far away from it, and just turned off it.
But you see it on the underwater films, don't they? They do the same on the bottom, but the analogy I always use is the difference is when you're looking at something that's on the surface, it's silhouetted. When you're looking at something on the bottom, it's camouflaged by the background. So, you know, it's amplified. It's you're going to get more rejections fishing on the surface than you are going to get fishing on the bottom. And we've all seen on the underwater films how many rejections. I don't mean ejections. I mean like turning away at the last second when they realise something's wrong.
Yeah.
And for me, one of the as I just said, like the biggest things of float fishing, if you can master the hook bait and get them not to turn away, you're onto a winner.
Yeah.
You know.
I think it's good idea actually. Like we're due out to film with Rob over the next couple of weeks, but if the weather is,
I'm free. I'm free. So if you're filming with Rob and he thinks there's floater on, I'll come.
Back to basics with Darrell.
Yeah, mate.
What do I do, Rob?
Well, mate, yeah.
Right, Lennart. So Lennart is coming on our social trip. He's after a bit of info. Good evening, lads. Would you please run us through your process and criteria to choose a peg on a pay lake draw? Wind, weather, recent captures, and so on. I want to choose wisely on the CarpFix social. Cheers from Germany, and fingers crossed for the finals.
Basically, it's about it. I'm thinking when I think swim, it's more about spot or spots. Which spots or spot do I think I've got the most chance of getting traffic on? You know, that is literally when I'm picking a swim, that is all I'm thinking about. And that spot choice can come down to whether the fish like to hang out of there because it's near a safe zone, near an out of bounds, near an obvious feature. It can be that it's got the right depth in it. You know, a lot of the lake's deep. This particular lake's got a shallow area. But I'm picking a swim based on where I think I'm likely to get the most traffic. You know, he's talking about Three Islands.
Yeah. Well, he's
so,
on the trip. Yeah.
But I don't know what his angling ability is. The central pegs, like 15, 4, 6, you need to fish long in those pegs. You know, if you can't fish long, my advice would be don't gun for one of those pegs because the fish will be at range when they're in front of you, and if you can't fish well at range, then you're not going to be fishing well. At Three Islands, you know the fish are going to be in that middle central area. You know there's always going to be fish there, but they also get in the corners. So I like, obviously 10's a really nice swim. What is that bay to the left of 10? What is it? 11 and 12 and 13 around there. Yeah. That bay,
it's a deeper bay. Yeah.
That bay's got a few snags and fallen bushes and that in it. That bay has always got fish in it. It's where
the big common gets caught from.
You walk around that bay and it looks like a bit of a duff area. Do you know what I mean? It's not alluring on the eye, but they get in there. And I think it's a short range swim where you can fish well and be confident that you're going to get a chance of a fish in there. 17 for me is an underrated swim because
very good swim.
I like 17 because you got a bit of a cut back in the bank to the left and a fallen tree, and I think that tree always holds fish. And then you can also go out to the island, but I like the idea of going up the side of the island to intercept traffic because you can't reach that island from 4 because it's so far out.
Yeah. But
I think from 17 you can go out quite long down the side of that island to be intercepting traffic that's coming round that corner. So 17 would be a good area. And I don't know this, but I also imagine that bay that's between, is it 7 and 8?
Yeah.
Or is it 8 and 9?
What, to the right of 10?
Yeah, you've got like you've got 2 spits and a bay of trees. And
in 8.
Yeah, that bay of trees, to me, that screams carp.
Yeah, it's very snaggy in that.
Yeah, but I reckon there's always carp in there. Always.
So that in that bay, I mean, we might be going off a bit of a tangent, but so from 8, if we're on about the same bit, to access that tree line, there's a bar that comes out, and you'd have, I don't know how you'd fish it.
But what I mean is, like, if there's always fish there, you can fish in that area, safe in the knowledge that carp are going to be in that part of the lake.
Yeah.
And also 7, the island comes really close, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So
real close. Yeah.
So 7 and 16 are like closer. If you want to be close to an island, although the crayfish will be bad around the island.
Yeah.
You're going to get traffic on those. You're going to get fish. Are going to swim over your rig there. They're swimming over your rig.
Like you say, 17. I fished that ages ago when I was at Corder. I borrowed your boat and some reels, I think.
Yeah.
And I actually fished the spots that you're on about to the left up the margin where the lakes used to be joined there.
Yeah.
There's like a little bit of an in-cut or whatever. I fished there, and then just past the island is exactly where I fish. What you're saying.
Yeah.
And that's where I caught fish.
Just past the island.
Yeah. There's no surprise.
Yeah. It's because it's real far out that island from everywhere else, isn't it? It's like miles out, like unreachable. Yeah.
Anyway. Nathan,
look forward to seeing you there.
Yeah, Lennart will be there. Nathan, evening, Darrell. Has Rainbow Lake ever been on your radar? A thinking tackle with Dan or Tom, maybe. Cheers, Nathan.
It hasn't ever been on my radar, really. I like to hunt, as in, like, I do like to sort of chase fish around. And I've maybe been scared off a little bit by all the sort of fishing around corners and stuff that I'd seen in the past. I would definitely fish there if someone I knew had it booked up and said, "Do you fancy coming for a week?" and it's a good swim, a good time, I would go for sure. So it's somewhere I'd like to visit. There's loads of places I'd like to visit that I haven't. I don't really know what's going on there. Obviously, in the Carp Talk days, there was always, those fish were just in Carp Talk all the time, those big uns in there. Whereas now, I'm probably not following the right accounts on social media because I just don't seem to see, other than Mozza going there occasionally, I just don't seem to see anything of Rainbow Lake. I'm a bit out of the loop with what's going on there.
Yeah. Paul Linwood, evening both. Now you're both with Sticky, will there be any Pecky Hearn content?
Is Scott on the sticky? Are you on the sticky?
No, he means her, not me.
Oh, so say again. Is there what? Did he say?
He said, now you're both with Sticky, will there be any Pecky Hearn content?
I don't think so. I'm certainly would love to. Mate, still to this day, still a big Tell fan, you know. Tell fish wherever you want. I'll get the net. I've not been asked to do anything with Terry, and most of the stuff he does is sort of campaign, and last thing you want is someone getting in the way. So I don't think so. But if I was asked to, I would jump at it because lovely guy, great angler.
Liam Banks, evening lads. Darrell, would you be happy with having the top bead on a naked chod around 4 to 5 foot up the main line, as the lake I'm fishing is very weedy and it has a lead core ban?
It's not ideal, that. But I actually saw Terry Hearn catch a fish out of Yates car park on a rig just like that. He, obviously this is 20 odd years ago now, but he fished. It was like they called it like a chodonoster or something. Like, so the lead was on the end, the rig slid, it had a normal hook link that slid right up to a top bead, like 5, 6, 8 foot up the line, something like that, with a balanced tiger nut, and it was fished onto weed. So like on a thick weed bed that fish are like bow waving over the top of, like plop the lead in, and then the rig comes to rest on top. And he caught carp at the car park lake doing that, like, which is like on a lake like that, it's like proper bit of angling. So it will work fishing a high top bead like that, but it won't be basically what you're gaining super presentation because it's allowing you to fish over the top of stuff that normal rigs can't present over, but you're not getting an instant hooking because you're so far from the lead. So you will probably get some spit outs, you get some fish be able to eject the rig, but if it allows you to fish in an area where you normally wouldn't be able to present, I certainly wouldn't rule it out. And being different like that, so many people would avoid rigs like that and fishing in thick. Sometimes you see a real weedy area of the lake and people just will automatically ignore it. And, in that situation, perfect.
Stephen Gladwin, question for you both. What are your top tips for Grenville from your time on there so far? Top tips on Grenville.
It really depends on the time of year, And the thing is, I haven't fished there enough to have like what I would say. I'm not like 100% concrete in my opinions yet because I have not built up the time on there to have sort of real knowledge that's backed from experience. But that said, it's a big lake. A lot of open water, a lot of deep open water. Fish spend a lot of time beyond casting range in areas that you can't access. So the back of the island from 6 is somewhere that a lot of fish go a lot of the time. and the middle of the lake, they jump out there over really deep water. So in the summertime, they're probably going nowhere near the bottom over that deep water. So it's like a waste of time fishing from out there. But of an autumn, early winter, I've caught them myself, like where they jump in that central zone, fishing off the back of the wind that helps you get extra range. And the fish tend to like the back of the wind in there in the winter. So that's autumn, winter, fishing on the back of the wind at long range towards the centre. I think that's a good tactic. And I think the other thing that I would say is like swims 11 and 12. 11, 12 and 14, or 12 and 14 have got that shallower gravel bar. That is prime real estate. It's a very obvious feature. You get in half depths of the main body of the lake. Those fish, in the summertime, that's got to be a good area. But I've not fished around that top bay and that enough to have. I've not got that in my locker. Like when I think about Grenville, all I think about is the fish in the middle that I've seen in the winter. I've not got the experience of where they get when it's weedy and like, do you know what I mean? I don't know enough about it to be giving you summertime advice on there because I'd be talking nonsense,
Yeah, I think the main thing that I've learnt from there was when I first heard about the place, a lot of people were fishing stiff hinge rigs, which obviously work on there the majority of the time. But when I first got there, we put this underwater camera in, and it was clear they put pop-up rigs out, and it was clear they just were not interested in them. So when I started fishing there,
fishing on the bottom,
I just fished just wafters on the bottom, and that's I've out of the fish I've caught from there, the only I've caught one or two on a stiff hinge.
Yeah, the
rest are all just on the bottom because I've seen them feed confidently on the bottom. Obviously, there is a rule in there where you can only fish like a couple of nights at a time.
Yeah.
So if you go and put a hell of a lot of bait in, it can take them 2 or 3 days to find it. And like on the latest sessions that I've been on, like you're saying, just up in that top corner, I wasn't fishing. I fished next to a guy actually. He was there he was allowed to stay on a few nights because he doesn't do a lot of fishing on there. But he put a load of bait in there, and then he left. I take the drone up at the end of my sessions to get some shots of the lake. Took the drone up where were a lot of the fish in front of him, short, where he'd put all the bait in, but he'd already gone.
Yeah.
So do you go in with the approach of slightly less bait and just,
I think you got to like for Grenvilles, when you're talking about amounts of bait, you've got to ask yourself how many fish you want. As in, like, are you properly on them? Because if you're properly on them, you can feed a lot. Or do you think they're going to come? Is the wind going to swing and blow them in? But if you're fishing in a little corner peg, or you think like a few fish might turn up, 20 key might not be the way to go. It's not. I don't like putting 20, 30 key in. You hear about it, but it's not the only way.
No.
No. Yeah.
Like I've fished. I've fished over a solid bag, caught on solid bags.
Exactly. Exactly.
But the biggest thing I've taken is I strongly fish on the bottom where possible. I'd still take a bit of time to find, once you know obviously where the fish are or whatever, take a bit of time to find a decent spot to fish on. Yeah. Just a standard thing. But yeah, just don't go too crazy with the bait unless you know something's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on them. This is it.
Yeah.
Like that session I done with Corder, I was fishing over handfuls of bait, just a few.
Yeah.
But weren't really fishing for traffic rather than fish real feeding.
Yeah. But it's a crazy place.
Crazy. Crazy.
Right, Chris Davis. Evening, gents. How would do you approach a deep reservoir a lot differently to a generic lake? So deep reservoir.
If the lake's deep, basically in the spring and probably the first half of the summer, I'll be ignoring the deeper water completely and fishing all of the shallow areas, will generally be around the edges. So even though they're jumping out in the middle, I might fish from physiques and whatnot out there, but I won't fish on the bottom from over the deep water because I think a lot of the time they'll be off the bottom. I'll be fishing around the edges on the bottom or out in the deep with the zigs. And then as the year, once you progress August, September, October, November, I find that the fish progressively are prepared to feed deeper and they'll start to fish in the deeper areas of the reservoir. But my fishing's always the same. It's like look, see, fish where they are. That's real simple. Like if you're gonna like break it down, it's like I don't know if it's low stock the reservoir. I don't know if it's big, but you're saying it's deep. My advice would be don't fish on the bottom in the deep water in the spring, and target the shallower areas around the edge. And if they are showing out over the deep water, try and fish sig rigs out there too.
Cool. Right, we'll do the last couple of questions. Danny has asked, "Hi Darrell, ever fished one of your rigs with a shot on the hook? If so, what are your thoughts on it? Strange, I've never seen it on any UK channels, whilst it's so common to us here in Europe."
I've done it once or twice on. I had a little fiddle with it on the underwater film that I've done for Corda. I don't even know if that one's going to come out. It is something that I have done in the past, as in I've cast it out and caught on it. But I'm the sort of guy that's always trying to eradicate stuff from his fishing rather than add to it. I'm trying to be as minimalistic and simple, make it as basic as possible. I know that it makes the hook drop down, but I also think it makes it more difficult for the fish to draw the bait into its mouth. That creates more resistance. And I actually saw it on the underwater camera. A fish come in, try to suck up my bait, and the hook bait didn't come, but it actually ended up taking it anyway. It sucked it twice. The bait didn't come, and it was like frustrated. It was actually facing the underwater camera as it took the bait, and you saw the rig go into its mouth and just go, just get it, like it was like facing the camera. You just see it, it just went middle of the bottom lip. So I know it works, but everything that has a positive can have a negative as well at the same time. So I don't do it because it's flaff, and I also have concerns about it coming off the bottom when they suck at it. Yeah.
Adam found a spot that's producing on a syndicate. It's a little soft, short, dead weed is coming back. Would you use a lead clip with a longer soft rig or a heli system?
I try to use a lead clip where I can. If there's a bit of weed coming through, to fish a longer boom like I was on that Corda film recently. But yeah, for me, if the spot's got a little bit of weed on it, it's almost like the fish aren't visiting it. If it's a spot that's doing a few bites for you, I'd put some bait on it and get it cleaned off. Get a bit of particle on there, put boilie crumb, that sort of thing. And the weed starts growing at this sort of late spring, early summer. But if you get it polished off now, it will stay clean. So that's what I would try and do. I would try and get it cleaned off.
Cool. Last question is from Sam. When fishing lakes with nuisance fish, should I just keep working through the nuisance fish? Should I change bait? Does a mix of bait attract more carp than a single bait type? I.e., do some carp avoid boilies but may visit a spot if you include sweet corn or tigers? For
me, my favourite way to fish is to fish straight. And when I mean straight, I mean if I'm fishing boilies, only fish boilies. If I'm fishing tigers, only fish tigers. If I'm fishing corn, only fish corn. Maggots, only maggots. That's how I like to fish, because I think if you've got exactly the right thing that they want, then you're onto an absolute winner. I can't think of any situation where having a mix is better. It's good if you don't know what they want. That's a good thing. You've got lots of things that could work, but I'm always trying to refine it down to exactly what they want, what they do want. What was the exact question? Sorry.
The question was, when fishing lakes with nuisance fish, should I just keep...
Yeah, I don't want to catch nuisance fish. Some people will say that if you bring the nuisance fish in, the carp will come and bully them off the spot and that. That's not really ever been my mentality. My mentality is always like fish where the carp are with what they want. I'm the sort of guy, if I caught more than a couple of bream, I probably wouldn't even recast. If it was like 2 or 3 bream in a night, I'd be like, yeah, I'm not fishing there anymore. I'll fish somewhere else, or I change bait. So, yeah, I try to. I'm always trying to avoid catching nuisance fish and allow my rigs to be in place when a carp comes. I'd try and fish around the nuisance fish rather than fish through them.
Cool. Well, thank you everyone for your questions. Next Friday we've got Rob Burgess at Farlow's Lake 2, where he does a little bit of floater fishing. I believe he also catches some off the bottom as well. But I think he does quite a lot of floater fishing. And then after that, the following Friday, the 26th, we've got Tom Stokes on, was it Devil's Lane, we were saying, weren't we? Devil's Lane, Embryo Lake. And then it'll be into August, where we'll have Luke Valerie, CarpFix Live, Rob Burgess, Free Eels.
Free Islands Lake.
Free Eels film, I'm hoping
I want to catch that big common at Free Islands. We've been there a few times now.
Yeah.
It's like...
Yeah.
He must be hungry for those crays. Those crays are eating all the food, like... Or maybe he's eating all the crays. Because they seem to be getting real big in there again, in Free Islands. Yeah.
Anyway.
All right then, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
See you next time.